Worst Things First podcast is where ordinary people have the type of conversations that reveal the extraordinary in all of us. Every walk of life has a downside. Now let's start at the bottom. Now, if you're hearing this rhyme, you already know the time. You're back with W.T.F.P, Worst Things First podcast. Here with your host, Crossfader, and today's guest, fantasy artist and illustrator, Tyler Walpole. How you doing, sir?
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
Dude, I've been super hyped about having you on, to the extent that it's actually kind of fucked up my process a little bit. I'll tell you how. So, like, normally, I'm excited about every guest, but normally I'm so unfamiliar with their walk of life or the occupation that there's only a few points of interest that I jot down beforehand, you know, because I'm actually going to need them to educate me on what the hell is it that you do? What does that involve? What's it like? And I don't know much about it, you know, whether it's a tree trimmer, whether it's a fire and smoke restoration expert, you know, what have you. But when it comes to illustration, comics, fantasy, things of that nature, I mean, dude, as a kid, I was into Lord of the Rings. I was into High King. I was into Sword of Shannara, the Darkest Rising series, all of that sort of thing. I remember getting my ass beat for stealing money to go buy the X-Men Series 2 cards in 5th grade.
I was going to say, I know you were into X-Men because I saw that on your work.
Yep. Traded the Wolverine Gold hologram card for an entire, the 93 Series 2 set with all 3 other holograms plus the 92 masterpieces. I got all of that in exchange for the Wolverine hologram just because this rich kid had looked everywhere and he couldn't find it.
I used to have a Magneto hologram one from that.
That's one of the 3.
I got it signed by Jim Lee. And when I had him sign it, this is before he was already a big name, but he wasn't super huge. Okay. But I just remember, like, as a little nerdy kid, this moment was really cool to me. I handed it to him and he looked at it like he had never seen it before.
Wow.
And I was like, so that was the very first one he ever signed.
That's ill.
So,
that's ill, yeah.
That's in a box somewhere in my life, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's a silver hologram. There was that one, Cable, and I feel like Storm might have been the 3rd one. And the 4th hologram in that series was the Wolverine Gold card. And that was the one that was kind of hard to find. So this kid whose mom was just going out and buying boxes, right? For whatever reason, they weren't coming across that. And here I am having to piecemeal, you know, suffer ass whoopings, trying to build up to the set. It was the best trade I ever made, man, because it turned me onto the Marvel masterpieces and all that sort of thing. Anyway, because of that, I already have an interest in the thing that you're doing. And so unlike most of my other instances of prepping for the podcast, dude, I started writing fucking mad notes, like books and books of questions. Oh, dude, ask him about this. Ask him what's up with that. You know what I'm saying? So we got a lot of ground to cover. I actually ended up throwing a lot of that shit away because I like the combo to be organic. And so I suppose I'll just start with something I think you can help me out with. So for our listeners, we will make sure to include a visual aid because there is now an item on the table. That item is an exact replica of Wolverine Claw.
Gotta get that for my Insta.
Yeah, for sure. Picked it up on my last stop out at the Weapon X facility. Got it home. It occurred to me when I started messing with the blades, these are a little bit dull. Let me sharpen these up, right? Then it occurred to me, the fact that I can even fucking sharpen these blades on the claws is a problem. So Tyler, I figured I would ask you because you probably have some insight. How the hell and why the hell were these claws not properly infused with adamantium as they should have been?
Are you asking me the secrets of adamantium?
Well, I figured you'd have an inside track in terms of answering, like, well, dude, only at this facility can you get the true adamantium joints.
Yeah, was it? I forget whose parent was responsible for that. My X-Men lore has faded a little bit over the years.
Okay. All right. So no help there. Next question.
Yeah, sorry.
Next question is, in your estimation, how long does humanity have left on this planet?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think we're going to be around for a good long while, in some form or another. I'm a little nervous for the short-term future. I've always had this kind of outlook that we have a diverging road ahead to either go full on Starfleet, like, you know, a society that's all focused on self-improvement and betterment and helping others, or the other one is Elysium, which I don't know if you've seen that movie, but
I can't recall. I know the movie you're talking about, but I've seen so many that have similar storylines these days. They blur.
It's a Neil Blomkamp movie where basically all of the 1% of the 1%, they live in a big satellite that's orbiting the Earth.
Yeah.
And they have, you know, science fiction level technology that can cure cancer and keep them essentially immortal as long as they want. Meanwhile, on Earth, it's just a used up junk planet. Yeah. So the whole everybody that's stuck on the planet is fighting for resources.
Well, I mean, have you noticed that a lot of the world's most wealthy have a whole bunch of hidden bunkers? They're talking about colonizing in space and all that sort of thing. That's a real thing. A lot of the richest people on Earth are doing that, have that. And a lot of their facilities are almost like they're built to sustain a certain level of radiation, certain level of atomic impact, all sorts of stuff like that. My daughter was just asking the other day, dude. She's 16, and she wonders about why the powers that be would do weird shit like roll back regulations that like, help with the environment, preserving life, preserving ecosystems and shit like that. And she was like, well, dude, why would someone do that when they also have to live here? They have to be here. Their offspring has to be here. And we never came to a conclusion, as those conversations tend to pan out. But dude, the only thing I can think of is something like what you're talking about, where there's a contingency plan where it's like, well, we're not going to be there anyway. The 1% is going to be here anyway. So
as bad as things might get in their lifetime, it's only going to be so bad that they need to control the immediate environment in their vicinity. Okay. So if they live out in California or whatever, as long as they can manage to live somewhere where they can keep it from burning and keep it from falling in the ocean from earthquakes or whatever, their life is fine. They're profiting. They're gaining more and more resources, while the people that don't have the kind of resources they do, they're going to be fighting for the scraps.
Yeah. You would think though, there has to be a long view involved though, because even just working things to the benefit of your immediate vicinity would always beg the question of, okay, but what happens when everyone in the surrounding areas becomes desperate, and now they go hunting and searching for the places where things are sustained? And so there has to be an end game, or there has to be some sort of climax to that whole thing. I would think. I don't know, man. I don't suppose you're going to solve this for me in this conversation.
Well, I think before every successful country and civilization experienced a big collapse, it was due to massive income disparity. And so when the haves and the have-nots look at one another, and the haves have so much more that it's unfathomable, that's when systems start to break down and people can't take it anymore. Right. I feel like America, anyway, we're on that trajectory right now.
Yeah.
I have no idea how long that trajectory is.
Yeah. The concerning thing is some of those projections are like real fucking soon. Man, I want to talk about how there's a ton to talk about, because I know you just released a book. So we have to get into that. We have to let people know where to find more of your work. We want to build a little bit of context for what all your work entails. But where I first came into knowledge of you, funny enough, was actually on Facebook. And it's due to my respect for you as a craftsman. I'm into people who are into carving out their own definition of success. I call it spending one's own currency and not spending the currency that someone else may consider to be what amounts to or what constitutes success. I remember at the time, we were conducting mural workshops, these graffiti workshops, and the city had painted over some of our work.
Yep.
They had painted over the students' work. There's a little bit of an outcry. It was crazy because the city of Des Moines.
That made me so mad.
It was crazy, dude, because for our listeners, what happens is there's an 8-week graffiti workshop that I conduct in the spring and fall of each year, usually for the kids that have been most dedicated and show some promise, and they're serious about the craft. By the 8th or 9th week, what we do is we actually get permission from the public school system to get them out of school. We cater the lunches and the food that day, and then they get to come and participate in a final project. That final project at the time was a flood wall that is visible from the city when you roll through one of the major thoroughfares here in Des Moines. And what happened was the city painted over work that was being done for that, and they did it under the false pretenses of it being a miscommunication. But the way in which that unfolded was actually pretty strange, just because they did it on a Sunday, which is uncommon. They did it after one complaint, which is uncommon. And that particular wall had already been authorized, not only by the city, not only by the superintendent of schools, but all of the boxes had been checked. All that aside, what happened was outcry arose. The public responded like I've actually never seen before. And within 24 to 48 hours, $4,000 was raised for those kids to go out and rock. And that was going to be the most heartbreaking thing, that these kids worked so hard and they possibly weren't going to have their final vision come to fruition. And what I remember at that time is Tyler, our guest, commented on the post and just said, you said something to the effect of, I'm behind this, or dude, I support this, something like that. I can't remember the words verbatim. But you spoke up and were like, dude, yo, I'm waiting to see what's up with this. More power to you type shit. I know that may not be your fucking vernacular. And so, as I tend to do, I was like, okay, well, here's, cool. Let me go check this cat out. Then I go and check the cat out. I look up his name. I see he's got Illustrator and stuff, written down. I go look up his name. I go to TylerWalpole.com. Walpole spelled WALPOLE. And then I'm seeing like this dude is fucking doing illustrations for all types of shit. You know what I'm saying? Lionsgate, Marvel Entertainment, Universal Studios, DC Comics, gaming stuff, just a full gamut of shit. And today, before you came in, I was like, I looked you up on YouTube for some strange reason. I don't know why the fuck I decided to, but I did. And I was like, I looked and I was like, oh, okay, 7 subscribers. And it made me smile. And the reason it made me smile is because we travel and we rock and we do this music thing, and we have a little cult following and people that show up and show out in different places. It even surprises me sometimes in different parts of the world. And someone will always say something like, dude, why do you guys only have 25 Twitter followers? And I'm like, probably because I've logged in once. I don't know how to use it, and I'm too busy doing the thing and more busy doing than talking about what it is we do. And so when I saw that shit and I put all these things together, and the fact that I thought about this cat's right here in Des Moines, he's not a blabbermouth type of motherfucker. He puts his head down and he just smashes out, and he's creating something special for the world to intake. I love stuff like that. And that's the type of thing that I'm really into being a proponent of. Before I say the next thing I'm going to say, any response?
No, not really. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. I think social media is wherever you put your efforts. So YouTube's like, I literally just put out one little, I made one video because I needed a GIF to go somewhere else. And that was the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. Dude, all right, so check this out.
And it is GIF.
I thought it was Jif. I thought the dude who came up with it said it was Jif.
I don't care.
He's about to turn the whole fucking round of the combo. Hey, so check this out, man. I could be totally wrong on this. I hope I'm not. Maybe it's because of all of those that internal sentiment that I just spoke of in terms of my impression of you. But I could almost swear that it was you that posted this quote that I'm about to refer to. And it was just something to the effect of you stating one day that people often talk about someone being talented. I wish I was as talented as you. I wish I could draw as good as you. And in doing that, it somewhat diminishes the work that a person may have put in, despite any natural talent they may actually have. And it ended with the statement of, if you actually wished you could draw as good as I do, then you'd actually be drawing right now.
That's probably something that's my sentiment. So whether those are my exact words or not,
I hope you said that, because
yeah.
I've already paired the quote to you in my mind for a long time now. That's what I'm into, man. The person who is prepared for what I refer to as the silent death, meaning that whether or not anyone sings your praises, you'd still continue to do that thing which pushes you. So that's why you're here.
Well, I like the Bob Ross quote. It says, "Talent is a pursued interest."
Okay.
So I don't think that I have any particularly strong talent as an illustrator, but I really, really like it. And I've always been, when I was a kid, I was just fascinated by, my big brother could draw, and I wanted to draw as well as he could. And he had like Dungeons and Dragons comic or books and novels and stuff with fantasy art. And I thought all that artwork was so amazing. And I just kept trying to get a little bit better and a little bit better. I never, I didn't drop out of the sky being able to do what I can do now.
Right.
I've spent thousands of hours honing my craft. Right. So, and I think I've, developed some skills despite, you meet some people and they just kind of have a vision and they have a really unique voice that they're expressing through their craft.
Yeah.
And I think I have to struggle to find that part a little bit more than maybe some other people. But yeah, I think anybody can learn to do it. You may have some inclinations that, maybe you're good with your hands, good with your eye.
Yeah. But
if you don't develop those skills, it's not, that talent's not going to just bloom all on its own.
Yeah. Yeah. So I read a little bit of the book, the art book that has recently been released, Blood of Dragons, which you should be able to find out more about at TylerWalpole.com. At the end of the podcast, we'll talk about any other outlets in which that is available. I believe it may be it's not the foreword written by Jim Butcher, but there's some early part of the book. Maybe
it's the foreword.
Is it the foreword? Yep. Well, there's a piece where it talks about you sitting and drawing while watching Saturday morning cartoons. I felt like that may have come from you as opposed to Jim. Maybe I'm wrong.
That part's for me.
Okay, so
that's like the introduction.
Yeah, so now I need to know, what cartoons are we talking about?
Oh man, everything.
Give me 10 ill joints from your childhood you were super into.
Oh man, literally anything. Like if I could find cartoons on. I grew up in a house we had 4 channels if you counted PBS, which right I wouldn't at that point in my life. Well, except for Electric Company, because that was good. But anyway, Saturday, I miss the ritual of Saturday morning cartoons. That was such a special thing. The whole rest of the week was basically getting shuffled around by parents and school and being told to be here and do this, okay, and do this. But then Saturday morning, that's mine. That's my time. No. I would go get the TV, and it was only till 11 in the morning or something. With so many entertainment options, kids are never going to have that ritual. But
right. So
sitting down and watching, in the after school stuff. There was that hour, the Hasbro hour of the G.I. Joe Transformers action. But Saturday mornings was the D&D cartoon was one of my all-time favorites.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's terrible. If you try and find, like, I got some bootleg DVDs a million years ago. I was like, oh, this is gonna be great, and I showed it to my kids, and even at a young age, they were like, Dad, this is really shaky animation.
Yeah.
I was like, I know, but that's all I had. There wasn't a lot to choose from, so like any port in a storm, right? So anything that was in the genre that I wanted to see, I was excited for. So Thundar, He-Man, Thundercats for sure.
Were you in the era when Cops came out? It was out for a very brief time.
Yeah, the cyber.
Yeah,
the cyber cops. Or whatever.
Yeah, and I had the boss. I talk like this, Shay.
Or Mask.
Yeah,
Mask. I liked a lot.
Okay. All right, that gives me somewhat of an idea. Remind me to come back to how a kid understands what shaky animation means. Remind me.
Have you seen the Toys That Made Us?
I've seen everything except the most recent season that's been released. You're talking about on Netflix, right? Yep.
Yeah, I've only seen a couple of the episodes, but man, it's pretty great because especially I love the He-Man one where it ties into. I mean, they were just selling toys,
right?
But it spawned this, the Masters of the Universe cartoon series.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's a dope joint to check out. Okay, so for the context of understanding who we're talking to, you mentioned being an illustrator. What does that mean? What does a typical day or month or half year look like for you? What does that entail?
Oh, that's a good question too. It's that's something that has kind of changed and evolved over my career, which I had my first paid work in the year 2000, and I think it was about 2010 when I got rid of the day job and just started doing artwork full time.
Okay.
So started out, I was, doing samples and sending them. I was trying to get into comics, so I was sending my samples to editors, and I was going to.
What's a sample for the audience?
I would do like a 4 or 5 pages of sequential storytelling, just penciled, not inked, and I would send those in to like every editor I could find an address for, and hope to get a reply. Because I read a story from Todd McFarlane had said that he started sending samples in every single month. So he would do 4 or 5 pages, and he would send those in, and it was like clockwork until finally he wore somebody down, and they gave him some work to do. He said just so that he'd leave them alone, but he's Todd McFarlane.
Right.
So anyway, like comics wasn't working out. It's really tough to get an editor to take a risk on an unproven talent and assign you an entire book when you're, of course, this was at a point when this is right. There was that huge comic or the speculator boom in the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay. Some gold rush type shit.
Yeah. So at that point, anybody that could hold a pencil was getting work, and I was just behind that wave. Gotcha. So I was running to the beach for the big wave, and then I just watched the water receding as I got closer and closer. Okay, new plan. And I like fantasy art an awful lot, so I decided, and that's what I really enjoy drawing. And there's not a lot of fantasy comics on the market at that time anyway, so I decided to start building a portfolio of fantasy illustrations. So just spot interior illustrations, all pen and ink work. And so
are these of characters you're making up, worlds you're making up?
Yeah, it was. Okay. It was mostly generic stuff. Here's a mummy, here's a elf dude in a tree. Okay. Here's just things, just illustrations that I thought would fit with what I was seeing on the shelves at the time. And at this point, there was a lot of the game books were color covers and then just black and white interior. So it was all pen and ink work.
Oh, gotcha.
So, which I'm glad for because it made it kind of approachable. This is kind of in my wheelhouse. I can give this a shot. So I gave up on pursuing comic book work for a year and decided to instead of going to Wizard World Chicago, which was the closest large comic convention I could go to that had the big publishers at. I decided to instead go to Gen Con, which was at the time was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and drove up there, and I took my portfolio of all of these interior illustrations around to every art director I could find on the floor, and ended up talking to an artist at a booth for Palladium, which is a publisher that publishes their most well-known game is Rifts. But this guy I met, Scott Johnson, is an artist, and I showed him my portfolio, and he looked at it, seemed kind of impressed, and he goes, "Kevin, I think you might want to take a look at this." So he turned around, and like Kevin Sambita, the guy that owned the company, came over and looked at my work. He goes, "Oh yeah, this is pretty good, man. Tell you what, I've got some work for you. I'll put you to work when you get home." And so like literally the next week, he sent me some stuff in the mail. He said, "Here's some samples of some of our gaming products, and here's your first write-up of your first assignment." So immediately got work.
Okay, so what is an assignment like? They give you a character. Are they giving you a character and now you have to create your own rendition? Do you have to create things that don't exist?
Usually it's some combination of all of that. Okay. So they do a write-up of like if it's a role-playing game illustration, and let's say they may have a character class, like we've got this new kind of cyborg character. This was for Rifts, which has I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's got it. The whole premise of the game is there's dimensional portals that have opened all over and come to the Earth. So there's everything is in the mix. You got robots, cyborgs, magic, machine guns. You got the works. So anyway, so if they'd have said, "Why don't you draw this new type of cyborg character? Here's what their faction looks like in these other books. So design that, draw it, ink it, send it in." Yeah. That was a weird gig because Kevin was not into computers at all. So he wanted to do everything by phone and fax.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wait, and this was what year? Around what time?
This is like about 2000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 99, 2000, right in there.
It was still within the realm of where an old curmudgeon could take that role, though. They could hold that position for a bit.
Yeah.
They didn't have much time.
He's gotten over it since then. So anyway, so that was Scott Johnson was the artist that I talked to before I talked to the owner. And then you fast forward 10 years later, Scott Johnson was working at Marvel and had been doing their style guide illustrations. So for years, and a style guide for a company like Marvel is if, let's say you make Frisbees or lunchboxes or something, and you're like, I could sell more Frisbees if I could put Captain America on this. Yeah. So I'm going to go to Marvel and say, "Hey, I'll pay you to let me to put some of your artwork on this Frisbee." Okay. That artwork comes from the style guide. So. Oh,
okay. All
right. So 10 years later, I ran into Scott at a convention in Chicago. This was it was the people that kind of took over that space after Wizard World started going downhill. And I showed him some of my latest work, and I had this big X-Men piece in it that was fully painted, fully rendered. And he made the comment like, "Oh, kind of getting into my wheelhouse now. That's pretty cool. I like that." And I just made the offhand comment, "Well, if you guys need any extra help, let me know." 2 weeks later, I got an email from his boss because they had gotten a whole lot of extra work that needed done. And they said Scott didn't have enough time to do it all on his own. So he put my name forward. And so then I was working for Marvel for a couple of years doing all the movie stuff, which making style guide art.
You don't strike me as the type of person that, has to talk about themselves, loves talking about themselves. But give us a rundown for our audience's sake of some examples of those instances where you've worked for Marvel or maybe illustrated something that's been used.
Man, if you saw any artwork in the stores around the time of the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, like I worked on almost all of that, some aspect or another. Scott and I traded stuff back and forth once in a while. And a lot of it was just taking sort of like photos and mishmash and painting over that stuff to try and make it look like a fully rendered illustration. So I got, and I worked on Winter Soldier. I did some Chris Evans stuff.
Captain America joint.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And did which was cool when I met Joe Russo and I had him sign one of the pieces of artwork I did for that. Ill, which was cool.
That's ill. What's the worst professional experience you've ever had?
Well, yeah, without getting into specifics, just any job that has poor communication and low pay is a terrible combination.
Yeah.
I've had a few jobs where I had to go back and forth. Yeah, I know.
Just to understand expectations and things of that sort.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah, there was a comic I was working on at one point that I had to stop in the middle because they essentially had me. Not only was I penciling the book, but I was art directing the inker and the colorist, and I was lettering it myself and didn't know how to do that at all. Yeah. I didn't know how to copy and paste on a computer at the time. Okay. So that was an experience.
Yeah, that's interesting. I when I was reading through, starting to read through, because I'm not nearly into any significant amount of Blood of Dragons, but I'm hyper interested, and I've been doing what I can to get into it. And when I was reading towards the beginning of it, I didn't realize that there's someone who handles the font, someone who handles the lettering, someone who handles the illustration, all that. And I was wondering at some point, the fiction, I was wondering at some point when I first saw I can't remember if it was Kickstarter or GoFundMe, but whatever the online funding source was.
Yeah, Kickstarter.
When I first saw that, I was like, damn, I wonder if he's like pinning the narration of this whole thing, creating that as well, how things unfold. Because I've always been interested into, alternate realities and sort of a fantasy sort of line of thinking. My family, in fact, is actually really big on mental powers and bending reality and things of that sort. Do you believe in such things?
In the right frame of mind, when I'm in the right mindset, I do.
I got you. So maybe 5 or 6 more drinks of scotch and then
something like that.
No, so it enlightened me to see that there's so many different facets of responsibility, I guess you could say. So that really, I don't know, that was just eye-opening to me.
Yeah, well, most of the book is me. There was just, when I was trying to get the book done and also trying to maintain my freelance illustration work at the same time, I've never done a project like this, and I was having a really tough time getting organized. So there was I hit a point where I realized, okay, I've got hurdles. Some of them are just mental that are preventing me from moving forward on this project. So I was like, okay, I need to start just knocking these hurdles down. Yeah. So I hired people to jump over them for me. Yeah. So James Sutter he's one of the co-creators of Pathfinder and Starfinder, which are both really popular role-playing games. So Pathfinder, for quite a while there, was like the main competitor for Dungeons and Dragons. So they were like neck and neck. And I've done illustrations for them for years, and James had recently gone freelance. So I said, hey, I've got these pieces of fiction that I can write poorly and give that to you, but could you take that and make it sound good and like kind of fill the page nicely? Because that's been his job, is like he would write articles so they would fit the necessary text block and stuff. So
it's actually inspirational that you took whatever steps were necessary to do that and to actually finish the project.
Here's what I realized during that is that collaboration breeds productivity, because soon as I started working with people, then I was committed to, oh man, I got to get this. Okay, the person I just asked to do A, I have to do B, C, and D before they can do A. So it just lit a fire under me, and stuff started getting done immediately as soon as I started bringing in people to help. Like, so not only did they help because they were doing labor, but that commitment forced me to do some of the labor that I was procrastinating or putting off or hadn't come into focus. Like, oh, this has to happen before that next step can happen.
I feel like everything aligned in the universe for this podcast to happen, for me to hear that phrase from you, that collaboration breeds productivity. Music is my first love. Hip hop emceeing is my first love before graffiti and all that other sort of thing. And I'm proficient enough at it to where I don't feel weird about saying that or egocentric about saying it. I just mean it. And I've had friends who have been into music, and they've been talking about releasing a project or an album, but they've been talking about doing that for 7 to 10 years. And I would always tell them, dude, you're having too many mental hangups. You actually need to go ahead and release a first thing. However you may be worried about that or comparing it to other things that are already out there, you have to do that so that you can then grow from the first thing and then create a second thing, and that's better, and then create a third thing, and that's better. And before you know it, it's simply it's your second nature to create all of these things.
Absolutely.
You know, and I've been wanting to write a book for a while, and I'm always writing down little notes, little pieces of dialogue, plot lines, and things of that sort. And I even went out and just isolated myself for a while a couple of years ago from internet and everything, just so I could try to get some heavy work done. And I'm finding that I'm in a weird little block where I actually need to take my own advice, you know, and just fucking do it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I have so much content and material and all that sort of thing, and I want it to be so right the first time out.
Well, can I tell you that, so Blood of Dragons I've got a whole story that I want to tell, and mostly what that book is the result of me procrastinating writing and like going, okay, what I need is more notes. Oh, I need to develop this faction more. Yeah. Oh, I should do some drawings that goes with that, until I ended up with this big pile of content that I was like, oh, I should just, that should just be the first book. And then once that's off the ground.
So the audience doesn't know this, but I gave Tyler a dragon knife. I won't go into details about it or its magical attributes. Just let it be known that happened. The reason I gave you that, dude, is so that you, just as a memento of like, you finished some shit. Like a fellow craftsman when like they've put out this thing that has taken so much of what lies within them, and they could have taken the easier road of always telling everyone that's asking them, hey, what's going on with that project you're working on? Oh, I just need to do this. Oh, I just need to do that. And you actually finished it. And so I feel good about the fact that you finished, and I'm inspired by the fact that you finished it. I admire that, because I know from there, if you do end up doing the next thing will be the thing, you know, or at least the potential increases for the next thing to be the thing. It was wise to call it Prelude. The whole time I'm looking at it, I'm like, why does it say Prelude there?
Oh, yeah.
You know, and now based on what you just said to me, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I've done everything backwards. Like I started out selling art prints at shows to try and support the project, to buy me time to work on it. Yeah. And then I put out the art book. Now I'm getting ready to pitch the comic to Image. So we'll see what goes on with that. But that's all backwards. You're supposed to have your story out and then sell art, and then maybe sell an art book if it's successful.
Oh, okay. Two points of interest that arose from that. One, I want to backtrack just a split second. When you talked about samples, and it was 4 to 5 pages of some sort of concept or whatever, right? And illustrations, penciled on.
No, just like storytelling, like comic book pages.
Okay, now does that have to have an ending, or no?
No.
Okay,
no.
So it's not like a short film.
No.
Okay, got you.
Yeah.
Got you. So them just the intrigue that can be created in that frame is that's what they're working off of.
So Like most of the time, most editors would be happy to see that you could, tell a visual story of a woman and her child going to the grocery store and parking the car and going in to start picking out some groceries. Because that's A, boring, and B, difficult. That's a lot of hard stuff to draw. Cars and a grocery store is a pain in the butt because it's a lot of repetitive images and things like that. And if you can take things like that and make it interesting, and then maybe Superman and a bad guy bust through the wall, so you can also show like, oh, there, I did an action thing. Yeah, like everybody can do the action stuff, but the professional artists, they can do all of that more mundane day-to-day things that people avoid drawing.
Okay. I understand that. I've talked to some chefs that have mentioned the measure of a good chef is if they can make a really good soup. Okay, so now understanding that, and now fast forwarding back to where you are now, you're potentially on the cusp of pitching this to Image. Did you not mention that there has to be some written aspect, a story involved with that pitch? Correct?
So yeah, for the pitch, there's definitely a fleshed out story that I'm going to be pitching to them. So and if they pass on it, then I'm just going to do it as a webcomic, I think. Excuse me.
Who's creating the story?
Me.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm doing all of that except for the lettering. I got a guy named Marshall Dillon takes care of that.
Okay. What's the sustainability like these days? And I know everyone's position is different. I'm not asking you to discuss business and numbers and things of that sort. Are you good and comfortable doing this full time? Is it a feast and famine situation? What's it like? And the reason I ask that is because most of the people in my crew that I do music with and tour with and that sort of thing, they've always pressured me to stop doing the 9 to 5, which I have, and tour full time because they've been doing that since they were 19, right? And my response to that is always like, well, number one, if my daughter breaks her leg or needs braces, Ryman doesn't have insurance.
Yeah.
There's pay involved and there's pay from graffiti, but there's not insurance. Secondly, I would hate to be in a position where my passion suddenly is a requirement to where I have to pay rent. I have to do this job for someone that I'm not necessarily inclined to do the job for in order to pay the rent that's coming up this week. So my question to you is, in your particular situation, how are things, man?
Yeah, actually right now, pretty good. It's been a lot of struggle over the years of, have a good year, have a bad year. I've got a whole year's worth of work that I needed a certain level of income. This was shortly after I quit the day job. I had a certain level of income I had to make ends meet. And I call it the freelancer's treadmill. I would start taking low paying jobs because I was like, well, I need money. Yeah. But I had to do those so quickly in order to make ends meet that I couldn't do any quality work. But because I needed the money, I had to keep going at that pace. So I was doing a whole bunch of stuff real fast and I didn't feel proud of any of it. So there's a whole year's worth of the internet I would love to delete.
I understand.
But right now, so my main job, my main client right now is Magic the Gathering, which is a tabletop gaming card game, which has been around for like 25 years. And that the collectors community for that has been really good. So, so I've been able to sell originals and sketches as part from my painting process because I've been creating those as oil paintings rather than doing like a lot of the stuff in the book is done digitally or, I don't have any oil paintings in that one. I got one gouache painting floating around in there somewhere. But.
So you create an oil painting, and what is it that's done to that or with that ends up in the game?
So I'll get I photograph the art, or I'll have it scanned in, and then I send it off to the art directors, and they make it the artwork that's on the card. So, and there's a big, it's a pretty popular game. So there's a lot of collectors and stuff around, and the original sales, like turning around and selling the painting, has been, that's new for me. I just started doing oil paintings a few years ago, and a lot of the stuff I did, we do artwork about a year before the game comes out. So I've got a pile of paintings sitting around somewhere that are waiting for the cards to come out, so I can put the originals on the market.
I've got at least 3 people at work in my 9 to 5 that I can think of who are into Magic the Gathering, and it's gonna fuck their heads up when I tell them that we were having this conversation. They'll actually want to listen to this. Is there a particular series or edition of the game that they should look for that would have your work in it?
I've had work in pretty much every set since the end of last year. So the Dominaria set was the last. They have a new set out every 3 to 4 months, basically. So and that's such a hard thing to keep track of, because there's, in a given set, there might be 350 pieces of artwork.
Oh shit!
Yeah, 350 different cards, and sometimes they've just with the most recent set, they started doing like variant cards that are harder to find and stuff.
Yeah.
So I did one of those. I did one that was it's basically Beauty and the Beast, because it was this set had a fairy tale theme to it. So I had a chance to paint Beauty and the Beast. So that's been a hit with the fans.
Man, one of the things that I do love about just existence is being ignorant to an entire facet of life. I can watch shows with craftsmen about anything. Project Runway, people making clothes, Face Off, where they make the monster mask and all that sort of shit. Anything where people delve into something so deeply that other people probably think it's weird that they spend that much time doing it. I'm actually particularly intrigued by that if I have nothing to do with it whatsoever.
Oh, I got a guy for you to talk to.
Yeah. So recently, I just saw you posted something, and it was a card you had done. I didn't recognize the character, the creature that was in it. I didn't recognize the source of it, but I saw someone giving you love and saying, hey, congratulations on being requested to do this particular character. And that, to me, meant the world to see, because I knew that what that indicated is that there's a whole world of shit I'm not even privy to, where someone could see the value in that. Again, going back to that currency thing. And I know that you understood what he was saying, and he understood what he was saying, and the fact that I didn't, but there's that much positive collective energy going on somewhere. I'm like, that's what's fucking up. I like that.
I'm always fascinated by, like, especially with how do you value art?
My homeboy, the elder of our street crew, which I can't name to protect the innocent, he says, as an artist, they'll never pay you what you're worth. And I believe that. So we have to like kind of settle for, in this weird world of like putting numbers to shit, we have to figure out what works for us, what we'll take.
Well, it's, especially with artwork, it's kind of arbitrary.
It has to be.
It's you're putting a monetary value to an emotional response.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, that's what I see. I do a lot of conventions, and you can see when that switch flips, when somebody comes up to your table and they're looking at your stuff and they really connect, and they're like, oh man, I have to have this. Like, what's the dollar value on fulfilling that need?
Yeah.
Because it's just an emotional need. Like, I love this and I want to see it again. Yeah. So how do I get that?
Yeah. And for that person, the value of that thing could be incredibly disparaging from someone else's value of that thing. And that's exactly what I mean, this whole thing of creating one's own currency. Real quick, so I talked to tattooers. For them, conventions are kind of like, they feel like it's a rite of passage. It's necessary for development and for paying one's dues. But most master tattooers would rather not be at conventions that I've spoken with. I can't speak for everyone. I know there's variances. For someone in your role, are conventions the opposite? What's a convention like?
So I do 10 to 12 conventions a year.
Okay.
And they have grown exponentially. So we're talking about comic book conventions, which is different than a tattoo convention. I say comic book convention. That's kind of an old school nomenclature. They're really pop culture.
Yeah, because conventions is gaming, right?
Yeah, okay. that one's specifically gaming. But most, like if you go to a like San Diego Comic-Con, it's like a little bit comics and a lot of movies and television and video games and everything in there. But so it's all pop culture stuff. And nerd culture has just exploded in the last 10 years in a way I could have never predicted. Like, so Emerald City Comic-Con used to be one of the biggest shows that I could go to. And that was about 30,000 people. This was several years ago. And Denver Comic-Con is a better example. They've been around for, I think, 6 years now. Their first show, they had 15,000 people, which was pretty good. And they were really happy with the results. So I booked to go to the second year, and they were expecting to have maybe another 5,000 people, but it doubled. So they had 30,000 people, their second show, which is insane. Yeah, and they had like a tiny artist alley. So that was really good for me. Anyway, the shows have gotten so big that it's become a main part of my income. Like, so I have a table that I set up and I put artwork out for people to check out. And I've got like a vertical display that goes up behind me. It's got a giant 8-foot tall dragon head made of, molten rock and fire. And then I've got lights that I put on all that stuff. Okay, so when people are walking by, they can't not look at it. That's ill. So, and all of that packs down into, I've got 2 suitcases and a carry-on. So I got 2 check bags and a carry-on to travel around the country and go set up and do shows.
Do you enjoy that?
Yeah, I really like if it goes well, it's a weekend of, people telling you how awesome you are and giving you money. So it's not a bad way to spend 3 days. But.
Do you enjoy it if that doesn't happen?
No, it's really frustrating. Like I've had shows where just nobody's buying anything, and that's that's a bummer. But
where you've ultimately paid to be there, you had to pay for the trip, travel.
Yeah, I did San Diego Comic-Con one year. I had a booth out there, which I'll be at again this year for the first time in 5 years.
You know the dates?
No, it's in July. That's all I know.
Okay.
I should know the dates.
That's all right. Send it later and we'll include it in a description or something like that.
But I went out there. That show's really expensive to do. The hotels are expensive, and it was really stressful because basically no one was buying anything for the first 3 days of the show because they're all waiting in line to get their exclusive special things from different big publishers that you can only get at San Diego. So they buy those and then they can turn around and flip them on eBay for triple what they just paid for them. Well, and then Sunday, everybody does all their shopping. So going into Sunday, I was going, I need to have the best day I've ever had at any convention ever, or I'm going to go home in the red. And like, I ended up going home in the black, but just barely. So it was, it was the best sales day I ever had. But it was all right at the end. My convention game wasn't quite as polished at that point as it is now. So
I got you.
I've gotten pretty good at it. I know how to present the stuff pretty well.
I mean, it sounds like it. Once you start considering even manipulating someone's visual perspective of the physical product by putting lights on there, positioning what goes where, then you're at a different level with it.
You're fighting for attention in a place that is a visual like smorgasbord, right? Like everything's fighting for attention. Yeah, dude. So
I remember being at a I won't for the sake of not starting any issues that have been buried peacefully, I won't mention the festival. It's not in this state, it's in another state, but we were at a particular festival, and I remember being in a booth selling our work. And that particular festival is ran by a particular underground label. And I remember people stopping by our booth, and we had a record player there so they could listen to the music and stuff. And the cat was super, super ready to purchase the record. And I was like, here, you can even listen to it first. He's like, for real? It's like, yeah. let him listen to it. He's like, oh, dude, this is fucking dope. Started to pull the money out of his pocket, turned the record over, looked at the credits and said, oh, wait a minute, this isn't such and such. And in that moment, I was like, but what does it matter if you dug it and you're moved by it?
That's such a bummer.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so his currency was different than mine would have been. And I just had to accept that. But so I totally understand when you say being in a sea of all that sort of thing and how you actually have to vie for visibility and all that. Hey, I got to ask you this, dude. What's your stance on, because a lot of mural artists, graffiti writers such as myself, while lettering and letter form and the anatomy of letters may be our first true love, and it's a requirement, you have to understand all of those things to be considered a graffiti writer. The next level is adding imagery and characters and things of that sort. Everybody has different vibes and references and paths that they go down. Some are more cartoonish, some are more classic hip hop graffiti shit. Because of how I grew up, I love doing characters from comics and all that sort of shit. Man to man, candid shit. I don't care if you hurt my feelings. I gotta know this issue. How do you feel when you see a graph writer or muralist use the reference of a comic illustrator?
I'm all for it. I do like to see there's a tradition that comes from in comics where, so, you know, that famous Dark Knight Returns cover that's got Batman silhouetted against the lightning. He's floating through the air.
Yep.
So that cover has been drawn with different characters a bunch of times. And usually, so the artist then will sign it and then they'll put after FM. So it's after Frank Miller. So it's like,
that's the sign of respect.
Yeah. So it's acknowledging,
okay,
like, yeah, this is the source of this. Damn. So like, because then it's an homage, because that's what it is, an homage.
That's what I'd like it to be. I remember when I did that Apocalypse, and I had based it off of the X-Men Series 2 cards from '93 that I got my ass whooped for stealing money to go and get. And that particular section of the cards is the arch rival section. Can't remember who Apocalypse was. Oh, he was fighting Archangel. And I remember posting the pic, and just as an artist, because I knew I hadn't drawn that character and created him originally, I just wanted to make that known and be like, hey, this is just such and such did this, and you commented on that thread. And when you commented, I on one hand, I was glad because we could finally place a name. I think the name you put was Josh Peterson. He did that. On the other hand, I was like, see, that's why you don't fuck around, try to copy people's work and act like somebody won't come call you on it, because there is somebody out there who knows this shit, and you have to pay homage and you have to respect shit. I'm actually glad you just told me that thing, because even though graph writers don't do that, I'm down to do that AF thing and maybe educate some others on it. You enjoy being so anonymous here?
What's that?
Do you enjoy being so anonymous here?
In Des Moines?
Yeah.
It's I guess it's not.
You don't even consider it.
Yeah, like my clients are mostly on the coasts or around the country. There's not a lot of local work for me to do, and then it's kind of weird doing genre artwork, like doing sci-fi fantasy artwork. That's a niche market, right? Yeah. So it just happens to also be, if you go to the right place, has like I said, if you go to New York Comic Con, they'll have 125,000 people show up for that. Yeah. So it's a big niche, but it's weird. I've got a studio down at Mainframe, and they have first Friday of every month. They have like open studio, and people can come in and browse around and check out your wares. And people are looking for like jewelry or like pottery or stuff that matches the couch, and then they come into my studio and it's all like dragons and monsters and superheroes and stuff. I like myths, I grew up taking that stuff in, and that's what I like drawing. But that's not what people usually want to hang on the wall, except for, so it's easier for me to go to a crowd that I know is friendly to that subject matter than try to reverse engineer it. And So I'm really lazy about marketing myself around Des Moines. Like, just the people who are into the stuff that I'm doing, they know who I am. So I see them at the comic book store, the game shop, or whatever.
No, I understand that. And I guess with the nature of your work, especially with this technological era, it lends itself to it. You don't have to get up and move anywhere for the market in that area to be more viable for you. So that makes sense.
Although I did have to spend my entire day like doing like online marketing and stuff today, like so I could try and get.
I hate that shit, man. I can't do it.
It's the worst.
If I drop a new thing, whatever the thing may be, maybe 3 posts about it I can make over the course of the year.
See, I read somewhere that somebody who's interested in a thing has to see it mentioned like 7 times online before they go, oh yeah, I should get that.
But okay, Tyler, you know what my problem is? I believe too much of the fucking fantasy shit we watched long ago. So in my mind, it's if they are the chosen one, they will seek it out type shit. You know what I'm saying? And if they don't, so be it.
See, I'm the other end of that. I'm like too Midwestern.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to toot my own horn. I made the thing. I put it out. There it is.
Yeah.
There it is. I did
the time doing a new thing.
Yeah. You gotta have a guy for that.
Yeah. Do you have a guy?
No, I don't.
No agent or nothing.
I got a rep for conventions, and I got an agent that helps me do original art sales, but I don't have somebody that does the online promotion stuff, which I really should. I was just talking about that. That's kind of the next step. Yeah. So, because I don't want to deal with that stuff.
Nah, you're good.
But I'm trying to get more people to like go to my website and, drop some coin once in a while.
Hey, where can people find out more about you, support you, purchase your products? Can you talk about that real quick?
Yeah, well, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm pretty active on there. It's just at Tyler Walpole. And then if anybody wants to check out my wares, you can check out, I've got books and art prints and desk mats that are on tylerwalpole.com. So, yeah.
Got you. Any announcements, anything coming up?
Man. I just got done doing a whole bunch of Marvel characters for a tabletop gaming thing. So okay. I don't know how long that's going to be under wraps, but that'll be cool when those come out. That's I've got a new style that I developed recently which is leaning more into that animated look, which actually in the Blood of Dragons book, that comic is in that kind of animated style. So I was doing kind of cell shading on the characters, and I'm doing digitally painted backgrounds because I was trying to emulate the feel of those Saturday morning cartoons that we talked about. Yeah.
That's ill shit. Tyler, dude, I really look forward to this, man. I'm glad you came out. Hey, when we first started doing this podcast, I was saying to our producer Mike here, man, I gotta have this dude Tyler Walpole on if I can get him. And so I'm really glad.
It sounds like you're wrapping up. That was an hour.
It has been, actually.
What?
Would you like to go more? We can get into anything. But no, man, I'm really glad you came through. I'm going to do as much as I can to make more people aware of you, which will probably amount to talking to 1 or 2 friends. But wanting to do so much more than that.
Did those friends have money?
Yes, sir.
Awesome.
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
Yes, sir. Anything else you wish we would have asked you or wish you could have discussed you didn't get the chance to, man?
Nah. I'm just happy to.
Don't bring up no fucking politics, man.
So no. I just gotta say, for the listeners, it's funny. I don't. As Fate didn't mention this, but I'm literally around the corner from where we're recording.
Don't tell them the street.
I'm not gonna.
No general vicinities or nothing.
I'm just saying.
I thought about that.
We're in the neighborhood. Well, you can cut this out if you want.
Yeah, I thought about that. But then I was like, you know what? Let me protect this man's privacy. Let me protect mine. The funny thing is I walk to a bus stop almost every day. And some days I actually see Tyler walking out and about. And there's even been 1 or 2 times, I think you've been walking a dog.
Probably.
I'm like, I swear that's that dude that I saw on the fucking TylerWalpole.com fucking website. And I'm like, if it is, let him be. Let the man be. If it's meant for us to, you know what I mean, to cross paths and get into more than just a passing, then it'll happen.
Mike,
and here it is.
He was letting the universe bring us together, and then he scheduled a podcast. So I don't
look.
I don't know how to reconcile that.
Look, all I do is follow instructions. And once again, this has been W.T.F.P, the Worst Things First podcast. Peace. Much love for rocking with this episode of W.T.F.P. If you enjoyed what you heard today and want to hear more honest discourse with interesting people from ordinary walks of life, please like and share this clip. Find us on Facebook and Instagram. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Every walk of life has a downside, and we begin the conversation there. This is Worst Things First, the podcast.